In 1973, Marvel Comics released its magazine, Friends of Old Marvel, or FOOM. It was ran by Marvel for its subscribed members, but at its core, considered a fan magazine, made by and for fans. A little over a decade later in 1985, Mike Shea would also create a fan magazine that highlighted underground music and passed them out at shows in Cleveland, Ohio. It was called the Alternative Press, and it would go on to become a professional magazine and company that would have the likes of Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fall Out Boy, and Willow Smith on its covers. These two magazines are only a fraction of a long-existing tradition of art and fandom. Fan magazines that have left its mark on the cultural zeitgeist, but is almost virtually unknown to the mainstream today.
They are personal publications where you have a particular interest or you and your friends have a particular interest. No, there are other people out there that have it, but mostly you just want to create something based about what you're interested in and what's important to you.
Fanzines are genuinely labors of love. They are made by people who do not see themselves as professional creators, but who really truly see themselves as fans. About maybe 500 to 1,000 items in the fanzine collection, depending on what you count as a fanzine versus a small magazine, a small literary magazine. And there is a certain distinction there.
That's Lisa Yazek, a Regent Professor of Science Fiction Studies at Georgia Tech, and she brings up a good point. The term fanzines emerged as early as the 1930s among science fiction fanatics, like Russ Chauvenet, who coined the term in the 1940s. These were considered small amateur magazines, professionally written and published for profit, and they were intended to not only provide entertainment to fans, but be a stepping stone into professional writing. However, Rindorf and the Organization of Transformative Works gives a definition that shows fanzines as less of a professional medium and more of an expression of a collective fandom.
Fanzines are sort of places bringing together the various works that people created around fandom or a ship, a character that might be their fan fiction, artwork. A lot of the popular early ones were from Star Trek for the Kirk and Spock pairing.
And when you look at the long history of fanzines and fan culture, you'll find science fiction media at the start of it.
We do indeed at Georgia Tech have we have one of the oldest and longest standing commitments to science fiction studies as a serious academic discipline. And that was something that my predecessor, Professor Irving Budd Foote, introduced in the 1970s. He brought in famous authors like Ursula Le Guin and Kim Stanley Robinson. And then when he retired in the 1990s, he donated his personal collection, it was about 8,000 items, to Georgia Tech, and that's where the science fiction collection at Tech was born. Altogether, I'd say we have about 1,000, probably, small literary magazines dedicated to science fiction, and then actual fanzines produced by fans or other fans.
Science fiction and fantasy, I think really you could just say speculative fiction. That kind of encompasses everything. We call it science fiction, but it's really science fiction and fantasy, and now a little bit of comics. This one that you had picked, that this index to DC Comics, is actually part of a donation that I helped get in December of 2021. And it was somebody in California who had a collection of maybe 50 or 60 comic fanzines. And they were from the 1960s. He had collected them as a teenager. And they were like almost new. I mean, for them to be, like 50 plus years old, they're still in really great condition. Like some of them have more color on the cover. A lot of these, especially these older ones, very do-it-yourself. People maybe on their home printers, their home, even before they had a printer or typewriter, typing them out, going somewhere, having them mimeographed, copied later when copiers became more prominent.
Some are done, there's typewriter, some are handwritten, some are just Xerox, some are cut up, others have artwork. It's really a personal expression about a particular topic.
They started out very much as homemade, photocopy them, pass them around at conventions, fairly underground, that you would need to know the person who knew the right person to get you looped into these circles.
I think it was word of mouth. A lot of these on the back, they always have a name of the editor who pretty much organized all of it by themselves. It's always an address, and if you wanted to subscribe, you can send a letter to the editor. They would add you to the list. Definitely more amateur writers, people, really fans. Like, you don't have to have any specific skill level to necessarily to contribute to these. People just interested for fun, or people looking to get their start as science fiction writers and hoping to get successful that way and then moving on to more professional. But I feel like most people, it was just a hobby. I think more original, but you know, there's that Star Trek one that I looked at, and it's like, it was right before the Next Generation started, and they were writing like a script.
Every year there's a contest, and every fan who wants to can write a script and send it in. And they pick the best script and then they film it. And a number of those fans who have won have gone on to become involved in the professional Star Trek universe. Looking at fan zines is really cool because it's the first step. It's this kind of amazing creativity, and it's the way that science fiction fans get to help build the genre.
I'd like to get more fanzines because we only have like a few years here and there. It's 15 linear feet, about 35 boxes this size, but we don't have complete runs of a lot. Any science fiction or speculative fiction, I mean, branching out a little to fantasy or comics or maybe horror, but probably not beyond that, just because we have to think about staying in our collecting area.
And since much of Georgia Tech's collecting area is sci-fi, anything more sports or music-based would fall into other collections across the states, or in some instances up the road to Emory University.
My name is Randy Q, and I am the Assistant Director of Collection Development and the Curator of Political, Cultural, and Social Movement Collections at the Stuart A. Rose Manuscript Archives and Rare Book Library. My job is to acquire materials of lasting historical value. My specialty is the punk stuff, but as you can see in front of us, we have all kinds of examples of fan culture and also self-publishing and the Xerox revolution. This one is mimeographed from 1969. You can tell by the purple ink. It was on a roll and they rolled them off. This is a science fiction and fantasy society, and it looks like it was in the UK, it was in England. And one thing I like about this one is it actually tells you how many issues they printed, 500. So there were only 500 of them that were made. It tells you who, that's what I love about this. It tells you who did what, how they did it. It has people's names and their addresses. These people identified themselves. They wanted to be contacted and reach out to other people who had the same interests. Yeah, can we start with Nomadic Underground? Because my friends did this one. So this was put out by a guy named Noel, who was in an Atlanta band called Afterwards in spring 1988. He just moved to DC, but it has a whole big section about Atlanta. Brian Najedli was a guitar player in Noel's band. And so this is how we found out information about the punk scene, right? There was no internet or anything, so you have this section, what's happening? And it tells you what bands are around. Fidelity Jones, Fire Party, Ignition, they came and played here in Atlanta. Fugazi played here in Atlanta. Marginal Man, they're breaking up. Right, that was news. And then you have things about zines that they came across. So you would send your zine to other people, and they would send you their zine back. And so there was this whole community and this whole circulation that went on. And this was how folks in the punk scene shared news. This one was published by a woman in Marietta, and she was in high school when you read this. This is an extraordinary zine. It's called Sprawl, and she talks about how she changed schools. No one knows anything about her. She doesn't say anything about herself to anyone, but she just kind of unburdens herself in the pages of this fanzine. There's a little bit of musical stuff in here, punk, but she says, I'm not an expert on music, and there are plenty of other people who are. So this is more kind of her life and what's going on. She's getting ready to graduate from high school, and she's worried about that she's going to lose her youthful enthusiasm for these things. She also says she likes to take pictures. And so here's something about fanzines that was published in Time magazine. Their portrait of what the zine scene is like is completely out of touch with this document that you have in front of you. These are all examples of do-it-yourself culture. Do-it-yourself culture has kind of become the ethos of the digital age, right? But this is where it started in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now it's manifested itself in the digital realm.
Now you also see digital zines that are created as PDF documents, sometimes also printed, but sometimes also entirely born digital.
These digital fanzines match with the current era of fan culture, online and constantly connected. These days, zines crop up with their own accounts, and an entire team moderating and contributing to the finished product. And they look different, from the types of paper to the type of art done to create them.
This was like the piece I did for a zine that I'm moderating for, and I actually really like this because like it was my first time trying to go for more backgrounds, clouds and stuff. I'm Wendy Hahn, and I've worked on, I believe, around 3 or 4 zines. They kind of all blend together after a while. I've actually been part of like one Osomatsu-san fanzine. That was actually like my first one, very old. But most of my fanzines have been in the Hitalia fandom or like / related fandoms, that sort of thing. When I first heard of it, it was usually in the context of my favorite artists announcing their contributions to fanzines and advertising it. I hadn't worked on one until like I entered college. They were always just kind of something that like I kind of looked afar from, and I was like, I want to do that one day, you know? But I wasn't very active on social media. I wasn't posting a lot of fan art in like my current fandom. I kind of started posting online more, and I kind of developed a name for myself. And afterwards, somebody actually like personally asked for me to join a fanzine. I decided to agree, and I just kept on joining some. Fanzines I've been on have included like fan fiction, writing anthologies. I know that some fanzines, they've done like side merch alongside the fanzine, like stickers, little bonus pieces that people can buy, like a premium version of the zine. I don't really check people's reactions to my pieces or to the fanzines because I kind of have a general philosophy of, you know, I put it out there and I let it be. Like, no use worrying about it now. It's out there. No need to sweat about it. I keep copies of my work on Google Drive in my own personal computer, so I always have that. But even then, I try to avoid looking at my old art that even I have saved for my personal copies.
In the modern era, we have the benefits of easily saving, documenting, and looking back on the works that we've done. But for many of the fanzines of the 20th century, that isn't the case. Much of the works put together have been lost to time. But because of organizations like Transformative Works, who have their Open Doors project, many fanzines are able to be preserved.
Open Doors is part of the organization that works on fan culture preservation. The other piece of work that we do is with preservation of print materials, fanzines, fan ephemera, posters, fan crafts. People might have these collections, but they're no longer want to keep them or have the space to keep them. We work with the collection owners to find new homes for those collections at various institutional repositories who collect in the fan cultures and fan studies areas.
We rely on people who don't throw things away. Someone I know donated the Nomadic Underground. Other ones we get from book dealers. Got an email from someone yesterday evening saying I was in the Atlanta punk scene in the 90s. I have all these flyers and all that. I was gonna throw them away, but then I heard that you have a punk archive. Do you want them? We rely on people and what they saved. And some people collected this stuff very thoroughly, and then some people just had like 2 or 3 different issues.
A lot of these fanzines in particular are a little bit more ephemeral than some of the publications. You can buy most magazines through eBay or A-Books or something. The fanzines are a little harder to find. You can trace, for 70 years, roughly, what were fans doing, how were fans connecting with each other.
Being able to save these works means saving an element of culture and saving the love and labor that was put into them.
Another project that Open Doors works with, or type of project, is memorial archives. When a creator has passed away and their next of kin or fanish next of kin wants their works to be preserved in a way that they'll continue to be accessible even though the person's no longer around. Taking these works that people have put so much time and energy and love into and making them in a way that can continue to be accessed rather than being lost.
I'm really interested in people who create their own culture, and these are people who are creating their own culture. They're not relying on mainstream culture to provide their interests and their communities. They're creating their communities themselves, and they're saying something about themselves and sending it out into the world.
I think fandom is, first and foremost, a community. My favorite part about fandom is just collaborating on ideas and just having like a really fun idea, coming up with story ideas, character ideas, designs.
They see themselves as active participants in that, and not just as consumers, but like I said, as prosumers, as people who take the stuff they consume and who make new things with it, who tell their own stories, who create their own cosplay costumes, who build their own podcasts, who create their own theatrical productions, and of course, who create their own fanzines.
It's a place for people to really create the stories that they want to tell that aren't necessarily told or accepted as much in mainstream media. And I think that that's a very powerful narrative, both to be creating, but also to be preserving.
This is one person who created something and is trying to make a difference, even if it's just their voice. So many times in this world, we hear the voices of certain people or certain classes of people or certain groups of people. And these are voices out in the wilderness that are crying and need to be heard just as much as the other voices.